Welcome to New Jersey's next governor. I'm Steve Adubato, and we're coming to you from the Agnes Veris NJTV studio in beautiful Newark, New Jersey. For the next hour, we'll be sitting down with the two major party candidates for governor in New Jersey. This broadcast is being seen across a number of networks, PBS stations WNET, NJTV, WHYY, also on Verizon, Fios, One News. We're also being heard on the radio on AM 970, The Answer, and WBGO. That's an NPR affiliate. You can also catch us on Facebook at Steve Adubato, PhD, and we're pleased to announce that we're being seen across the country on C-SPAN. Right now, we're joined by the Republican candidate for governor, Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here, and we'll be joined by Democratic candidate for Governor Phil Murphy in just a bit. But before we go to questions, we have a brief report from our partners at NJTV News on the Lieutenant Governor's campaign platform.
Kim Guadagno defeated a strong opponent to win the Republican nomination. For nearly 8 years, she has been New Jersey's lieutenant governor, the first person ever to hold that office. Before that, she was Monmouth County sheriff, and before that, a federal prosecutor. She's running on a plan to cut property taxes. Her so-called circuit breaker plan would cap the school portion of a homeowner's property tax bill at 5% of income. Above that, the state would pay the school district directly. Average savings, $800 per homeowner, says Guadagno. Cost to the state, $1.5 billion, she says. Her opponent, Phil Murphy, questions where that money would come from. Guadagno says $1 billion would come from natural revenue growth, $250 million from overfunded school districts, and $250 million from a comprehensive audit of state government. Guadagno is also running on the idea of electing the state attorney general instead of it being a gubernatorial appointment. Guadagno chose Carlos Rendo, the mayor of Woodcliff Lake, to be her lieutenant governor running mate. Her strategy is to hammer home the tax issue and hope it does for her what it did for Christy Whitman 24 years ago. Her Achilles heel is her closeness to Governor Christie, who has become terribly unpopular. She has tried to separate herself from him on issues like the gas tax hike and State House renovation, but she was his number two, and Democrats won't let voters ignore that. With Donald Trump also unpopular in New Jersey, it's a tough climate for a Republican candidate for governor.
I want to thank our good friend Michael Aaron, the Dean of the State House Press Corps, NJTV News, for that report. Lieutenant Governor, let's go right to property taxes. By the way, we had thousands of questions that came to us from on a variety of platforms. This one comes from AM 970, NJTV, Facebook, Twitter, other places. Property taxes. Describe your plan in more detail.
Well, it's very easy. The number one problem in New Jersey is property taxes. I can go to any room in the state and ask people what's the number one problem they have, and it's property taxes. They can't afford to live here in New Jersey anymore. They're all planning their exits, and we need to address the number one problem that is on their minds. Now, my property tax plan would simply cap, if you will, property taxes at about 5% of household income. That means basically, for your listeners, $800 in savings on average.
What happens if it goes over?
If what goes over?
If it goes over that amount. I mean, if the town says, you know what?
It would be a good thing if they got more than $800.
No. Okay. It caps, I want to understand something.
Right.
It caps the increase?
No. 5%. You never pay more than 5% of your household income for your property taxes.
Never pay more?
Right. Never pay more.
And what about if the locality says, you know what, we need more for schools, we need more for transportation? What happens then?
The school gets reimbursed. They send a bill, if you will, to Trenton, and Trenton comes back and reimburses you for the difference in the amount.
You say it's the number one issue in the state, property tax?
Absolutely. I defy anybody to show me any information that says anything different. People can't afford to live here anymore. I mean, I've been here for 8 years, Steve, and I'm bringing businesses here for 8 years. And the number one problem I hear from the people that work in those businesses is, I can't afford to be here anymore. They're moving to Pennsylvania, they're moving to New York. When they get to be my age, 58, they start to plan on how they're going to move out of New Jersey. This 5% of household income, this average savings of $800 per year will allow them to stay here. You know, if $800 might not be a lot for Phil Murphy because he's a multimillionaire, but $800 for the people that I've met over the last 8 years is a lot of money.
Let's talk school funding. These questions came from our friends at NJ.com, from InsiderNJ.com, Facebook, Twitter, other places, and it deals with school funding. And frankly, the school funding issue, from the state money to local school districts, has a lot to do with property taxes. Describe your school funding plan.
Well, the school funding plan starts with the 5% of household income. Really quite simple. We are going to help people who need the most help now with the 5% of household income. Save everybody about $800 of the school property taxes right now, the first day we walk into office. Why do I think that's going to work? Because we pulled a page out of a Democrat playbook in Massachusetts and Illinois. And the school funding plan is really pretty simple. Let's just make sure we're getting our money's worth. Let's go back into these districts. Let's make sure every penny that we spend is being spent for the kids, giving them a thorough and efficient education. You know, I haven't heard anything from Phil Murphy except that he's going to fully fund the school funding formula. Look,
what's wrong with that?
Well, I think
it's the law.
It's a great idea if you could afford it. The question is, how do you afford all of the things that Phil Murphy has promised? He's promised free pre-K education. Everybody I know would love to have free pre-K. I mean, I had to pay for my son when I went to work because I was a two-income family. I had to pay for my sons to go to pre-K because I could afford it. That was great. But everybody in New Jersey wants free pre-K. But how do they pay for it?
But what about those who can't afford it? What about those who are on a lower economic scale, if you will, and just can't afford that pre-K? And we know how important pre-K is to a child's development. Go ahead.
Well, we're already funding it. We've already begun. We had pilot programs in place for years, and then we just added some more money to it this past year.
About $25 million,
Yeah, $25 million. So that's a start. The question is a question of priorities. In my mind, if you make New Jersey more affordable by keeping taxes low, then more people will be able to stay here. They'll be able to get better jobs here, and they'll be able to afford to live here and not have to move out of New Jersey.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned pre-K. We're involved in an initiative that tries to raise awareness around issues and challenges that babies and infants are facing this, birth to 3.
Right.
By the way, the initiative is called Right from the Start, NJ, that we're involved in with some other folks. Is there more state funding, let's say, reimbursing child care centers?
Oh,
right.
okay.
Just from a public policy point of view, we've had legislators come out and say, we don't fund enough to those to folks in terms of reimbursement for child care at that age.
Don't disagree at all. As a working mom, I had to sometimes make a decision. If my babysitter didn't show up, do I go to work or does my husband go to work? And it really was a rock, paper, scissors, shoot kind of thing. I think we need, so that mostly working mothers, most of us need affordable, reliable daycare. And one of the ways that we make sure we do that is give tax credits. Now, we have flexible spending programs. I took advantage of a flexible spending program, saved me a lot of money over time. But I think we need to do better to make sure that our working mothers have what they need. And one of the other ways to do it is, quite frankly, Steve, is to make sure they can afford to pay their taxes. It all comes back to the same issue.
Taxes?
We need to fix this election, Steve, is going to be a referendum on taxes. And if anybody
Property
thinks
taxes, income taxes,
taxes. Phil Murphy has promised an additional $75 billion worth of spending. We added it up. It's on our website, kim4nj.com. And just the other day, he added another 200 or 400 million because of his plan for free community college education. Right. It keeps going up and up and up. He's admitted to $1 billion worth of additional taxes. That's one promise I think he'll keep. But I believe he's going to spend more than that. And people in New Jersey understand one thing, and that's their pocketbook. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's an issue of whether or not they can stay here, keep the roof over their heads, and food on their table.
By the way, Ambassador Murphy will be joining us in the second half hour, or the half hour of this. The other half hour of this program. He'll have an opportunity to not just defend himself, but make his case and talk about his concerns about the lieutenant governor. In a very civil discourse. We appreciate that. By the way, I'm going to ask him the same question. Your family, describe it.
My family is fabulous. I moved to New Jersey after moving all around the country because my husband's family was born and raised here, and I knew my family wasn't going to move around the country. We had to look for jobs. I know what happens if you lose your job and you have to leave a state. I know what happens to the family. I know what happens to a community. We need to make sure families stay together and they stay here in New Jersey. And the only way to make sure that happens, quite frankly, is if we lower property taxes in New Jersey. That's really the ongoing problem. So I'm a proud first lieutenant in the Air Force. The ultimate public school education is the United States Air Force Academy, and he went to a public school in Monmouth County. The second child is now about to graduate from college. He's finishing his year, his last year of college, and he already has a job going to work in the city. And then the last child is 17. He's the ultimate equalizer. He keeps your feet firmly planted on the ground.
Hardest job in the world, being a mom or being governor?
Now, that's a close call.
I'm just going to say.
I'm telling you right now, the hardest job in the world is being a mother.
Just check.
There's no doubt, because you're a working mom, I'm a working mom, and they don't care what you do during the day. They want to be, their laundry needs to be done, their clothes need to be folded, and their food needs to be on the table.
Lieutenant Governor, I'm just saying, being a dad's challenging as well, but point well taken. How about this one? Pensions.
Yes.
We've had a lot of conversations about public employee pensions. There was a reform effort that took place several years ago. Republican governor that you know well, Chris Christie,
yes.
and the Democrats in the legislature did this. So these questions came from files from NJTV News, from WNET, from AM 970, everyone, including, by the way, thanks folks who follow us on Twitter. You see it right there. So many great questions. People were simply asked, how would you deal with, solve, improve the pension crisis in the state of New Jersey?
Right. Quite frankly, the first thing I would do is treat it honestly. Anybody who says this pension isn't broken is lying to you. Anybody who says that they can fully fund the pensions in New Jersey is lying to you.
Why lying?
Well, because they're lying. Everybody knows. You could sit down with the NJEA, as I have.
The New Jersey Education Association.
Thank you. And sit down with them and say, look, your pension isn't funded. You're hiring teachers right now and telling them they're going to have a pension when that pension will not be there. We need to sit down and talk thoughtfully about it and honestly and respectfully about it. And there is a plan. Now, I think we also have to separate things out. The law enforcement pensions are almost fully funded. I think they
Why do you separate them from teachers?
Because the teachers and CWA and other public workers,
Communication Workers of America,
right, are a little more underfunded, a little less funded. So I think the law enforcement pensions are almost funded.
Right.
There was a deal almost this summer to separate them out and let them manage their own pensions. Let them do that if they want to. It's their pension. They should manage it the way they want to, so long as the taxpayers aren't on the hook for it. And then we need to sit down with the teachers. And I told this to them when I went to talk to them about their endorsing me for governor. I said, look, let's sit down and talk about this problem and fix it. Let's fix it once and for all. They'd already endorsed Phil Murphy.
No, I know that, but here
they endorsed Phil Murphy before they talked to me.
That's their right, just like it is any other organization. But that being said, by the way, to disclose, the NJA is an underwriter of our programming here on public broadcasting. But I also want to clarify this. There has been a commitment about the state fully funding the pension situation and underfunding it for years and years and years. Many said Governor Christie has done, not many said, it's a fact. He has spent more than many other governors together. But we're still way behind. Right. But still underfunded. What is wrong with simply saying the state's going to do its job?
Well, the state should do its job, but the problem is paying for it. So the question becomes, so the pension payment is $5 billion in pension payment and another $10 billion in health care. That's $15 billion. We have a budget of
Meaning the whole?
No, that's what we owe.
That's the annual.
If we make a full pension payment next year, it's $5 billion for the pension and another $10 billion for health care.
By the way, it could be $30, $40, $50 billion in the whole total.
Oh, it's more than that.
It's more than that? Yeah. And what happens if it doesn't get resolved 10 years from now, 15 years? Well,
that's why it's going to be resolved. That's why it's going to be resolved.
What would you do?
I would sit down in the room and negotiate like management and labor should negotiate. We should pull out the Tom Byrne, for example, pension reform package, take a look at it. If you, Tom Byrne and Healy, and it's online, you can get it. Or even pull Phil Murphy's pension package from 2006 when he did it for Governor Cody and take some of those recommendations.
But name one, respectfully, Lieutenant Governor, to say we're going to sit and negotiate, that's great.
Right.
One concrete idea that would improve the situation?
Oh, easy. Go to generics. On the healthcare side, go to generics.
Instead of prescription drugs?
Right. Just require, instead of having the gold platinum standard for healthcare benefits, let the labor union take a look at where they could find savings in healthcare. I'm told, and the Byrne Commission says we could save $2 billion. Take that $2 billion and put it in the pension. Right there.
By the way, if you want to engage Lieutenant Governor, you can find her website to continue that conversation. I'll remind folks watching this is a 1-hour special we're doing on New Jersey's next governor. Lieutenant Governor is here right now. She's the Republican candidate for governor. Her Democratic opponent, Ambassador Phil Murphy, will be joining us as well. We're being seen on a variety of PBS platforms in the region, on radio as well, on Verizon, Fios, and we're also seeing nationally, you can see us nationally on C-SPAN. Real quick, I'm going to a couple other topics. Healthcare. Who knows what is going to go on in Washington as it relates to the repeal of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, or not? Where do you see New Jersey right now in terms of the way we are providing health care for those who need it the most? And to what degree are you concerned about the president continuing on this track to repeal and replace Obamacare?
Well, I'm very concerned about where we're going in the future. Of course I am, because there's been discussion about pulling the rug out from people that have insurance in New Jersey that rely on that insurance. So back in a couple years ago when we agreed to the waiver, we signed up 530,000 more people to the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
We can't pull the rug out from underneath them. So I'm confident that people are good and working in good faith to make sure that our 530,000 additional insureds will get the insurance that they need, that they will have pre-existing coverage, pre-existing condition coverage, and also afford to pick their own doctors and make it an affordable plan, and we need to do that. And that's where we need to go to our congressmen. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, and make sure that they do that in Washington. And it's just not the president. It's everyone.
So Congress as well.
Right. Everybody.
Republicans in Congress.
Right.
The Democrats don't want to repeal
well,
it.
Well, balanced government can sometimes be a problem, as you see. And in New Jersey, if we don't have a Republican governor, we will not have balanced government. We will have imbalanced government. We'll have the legislature in the hands of the Democrats, and the governor's office in the hands of the Democrats, and there'll be no check and balance. And I think people in New Jersey like divided government.
They do?
I think
Even
so.
if it produces gridlock?
Well, in New Jersey, I don't think it has produced gridlock.
People will decide.
They will decide.
But here's another interesting issue connected to that. So Donald Trump, you were here a few months back when you were running in the primary. We had an interesting conversation about Donald Trump. You've had a few more months to examine his presidency. Your views, Lieutenant Governor, on the president's presidency and how well he is doing, particularly for people like the folks in Jersey?
I'm looking at how Washington impacts New Jersey. A governor from New Jersey is going to have to go to Washington and work with that president. So from my point of view, we have 1 trillion reasons to get along with Donald Trump, meaning the money he's promised to put into infrastructure. I like what he's done with regulations. We did it with regulations here in New Jersey. We need to be more business friendly, not just in New Jersey, but also nationally. We need to be more competitive. I like some of what I'm seeing in terms of taxes. I don't want to see anything that hurts New Jersey, and there's been some conversation about changing the tax form that would hurt New Jersey. But the fact that we're changing our tax structure, anything that helps grow our economy here in New Jersey, anything this president does that helps the people of New Jersey is something I'm going to fight for.
In that spirit, as it relates to DACA, immigration, these dreamers, the DACA decision for these students, not just students, there are 22,000 New Jersey residents. People call them kids. Some of them are very young, some of them are 20, 22, 24, different ages. The president saying at first, hey, listen, they got to go. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, they got to go. We don't know where that's going to go. Where do you think it should go?
Well, I think we need to honor the deal we made with the Dreamers. I mean, we can't kick out. We shouldn't kick out.
But why is there even a discussion? Sorry for interrupting, Lieutenant Governor. Why is there even a discussion about that?
Why? I don't know. You'll have to ask Washington. I think it's because they haven't.
It's not Washington. It's the Trump presidency, the White House.
No, I think it's Washington. I think it's both sides. I think that immigration is a problem on the federal side that has not been fixed in years. It goes well beyond this president and, frankly, the president before that. I think it's a problem that needs to be fixed. I think all of us have to go to our congressional leaders and tell them what I've said. There's 20,000 or so Dreamers in New Jersey. We're not going to be destroying families in New Jersey. They didn't have a choice about coming to New Jersey. They should be I don't think the right word is saved, but they need to be, the problem needs to be addressed in Washington. And
the immigration issue.
The immigration
What
issue.
about those who are the rule of law? Hey, it's the rule of law. They're not supposed to be here. President Obama had the executive order. It was supposed to run out. Runs out. They got to go. Rule of law, you say, and you know law better than most.
I've said it many times. It's 20,000 people in New Jersey who came here as a family member, whether it was at 2 or now that they're 30, that we will not tear apart. We will never advocate for that kind of draconian response.
Right.
What the president has allowed Congress to do, and quite frankly, I think there's 800,000 leverages, because that's the
right.
number across the country, for the Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, to deal with this problem. And I think that's the leverage we need to finally deal with this problem. Because why should people be worried about whether they're going to be deported or not if we can fix it? And I choose to believe, Steve, that we will fix it because we are good people here, not just in New Jersey, but across this country.
Yes or no to, by the way, this came from NJTV News, our Facebook site there, AM 970, WNET, FiOS, other places. The question kept coming up, sanctuary cities. Where is the Lieutenant Governor on sanctuary cities?
Very clear. I'm a former federal law enforcement official. I'm a former state law enforcement official.
You're a sheriff as well?
I'm a former sheriff. And I believe sanctuary states are bad for law enforcement.
Cities?
All the way around. Well, my opponent has said he wants sanctuary state. He wants to make the entire
What would be wrong with that?
state. Because it puts law enforcement at risk. Just for starters, it puts law enforcement at risk. It's not going to stop federal immigration officers from coming in and enforcing federal law. We don't, as the governor, and this is where my legal background comes in, I suppose, and my law enforcement background, we don't have the authority to stop immigration officials from coming in and doing whatever the law, federal law, allows them to do. So they're going to come in. All it does is put a target on the backs of the people in New Jersey who believe that they're being protected because of sanctuary cities or state. And second, I think it put our law enforcement officers completely at risk.
You don't like this?
Oh, I think it's just a terrible policy. I think if you want to fix immigration, go to Washington and fix the immigration problem. And if we don't, we're putting everyone at risk. The people who will be led to believe they're safe in New Jersey as a result of sanctuary state, and law enforcement officials. And the one that really scares me is law enforcement officials, because what you're really saying is our local law enforcement officials will not provide backup for other law enforcement officials. Unacceptable.
To be clear, we're going to have Ambassador Murphy. He'll have an opportunity to talk about his immigration policy, about sanctuary cities, states, et cetera, the other part of this 1-hour special. Lieutenant Governor, how about this? Legalizing marijuana. This question came again from so many folks, but particularly NJ.com. It was flooded with hundreds of questions around this question, legalizing marijuana.
Well, the only explanation I've had from Phil Murphy about why we need to legalize marijuana is to generate revenue. And let me tell you that I can think of any number of ways to generate revenue that are not going to include legalizing marijuana and putting a whole generation of children at risk. I have a 17-year-old son. I'm not saying he does marijuana, but I'm saying that if we legalize marijuana, he's going to have the opportunity. And I don't want to give him that opportunity. If there's any risk that marijuana is a gateway drug, then I think we can find other places to generate revenue. In fact, I'm sure of it. And to go first to legalizing marijuana in order to balance a budget to pay for any number of the $75 billion worth of extra spending Phil Murphy wants to do, I think, is irresponsible.
Well, who says first? And respectfully, who says first? Say someone says we look at a bunch of other things and ultimately we go, you know what? A lot of other states have done it. We're going to consider it. It would potentially bring in revenue. Not a bad idea.
Phil Murphy said it.
I know, but
Phil Murphy said it. I mean,
he said it first, like that was the primary part of his platform?
Sure. Ask him in a half an hour. You will see.
I will.
He said he thinks that one of the ways to balance this budget and pay for all of these things he's promised all of those people in the primary is to legalize marijuana. I say we audit Trenton. We stop the State House renovation. We find...
The one that the governor wants?
We stop the State House renovation.
That's a bad idea?
That's a $300 million price tag right there.
You disagree with the governor on that?
Yes.
You know something about transportation because you drive on the roads of New Jersey, and we're congested, and we've got problems. Can I ask you a question about, I will ask you the question, AM 970 and Twitter and Facebook and others on this one, FiOS as well. The question that kept coming in was the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. How much impact does it play in our life, and what would you do as governor? Because the governors of both states, Cuomo in New York, whoever the governor is going to be in New Jersey, big impact on the Port Authority in our lives.
Well, it does have a big impact.
What would you do differently?
Well, what I do differently, I would continue to get New Jersey's fair share of what's going on. So I'll give you the one example, Bayonne Bridge. If we had not put $1 billion of Port Authority money into the Bayonne Bridge and raised it, a feat of engineering,
it's a big deal.
It really was amazing to see the bridge raised high enough to bring in the super tankers. If New Jersey had not fought to get the $1 billion to raise that bridge, the Port Authority the port would have been closed.
By the way, the port runs that bridge. We should be clear as to why this is an issue.
Oh, sure.
I just want to make sure people understand that. So what does that have to do with, so you're saying New Jersey gets the shaft?
I'm saying that we need to continue to fight to get our fair share. And if there's not a strong governor who understands the need to do something like raise the Bayonne Bridge so that we can continue bringing in Panama Canal super tankers, like you saw go through just last week, we're going to lose an entire ecosystem. And we can't afford to do that. So I don't think there's a lot of debate on that one. I think that any governor in New Jersey has to pay very close attention to making sure the money that goes to the Port Authority is spent on port projects or projects that have to do with transportation, and that New Jersey gets its fair share.
Yes or no on the Gateway Tunnel?
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Critically important?
Yes.
Couple more, real quick. We have 1 minute left. Thank you, guys. By the way, I want to thank everyone for all the questions that you posed. Smart, thoughtful, making my job very, very easy. Probably the last question I want to ask you. The biggest reason why your governorship would be different than your opponent if he were elected is?
Taxes.
You're going back to taxes?
Taxes. This is a referendum in November on taxes. If you want a Goldman Sachs millionaire who has promised to raise your taxes, then vote for Phil Murphy. I'm a working mom, a former sheriff who's created jobs in this state for the last 8 years, who understands that if we increase taxes on the most taxed people in New Jersey, those jobs will go away. And I have pledged not to run again if I don't lower taxes in New Jersey.
I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New Jersey, Kim Guadagno, for joining us on New Jersey's next governor. We appreciate it, and all the best to you and your family.
Always.
We'll be back right after this with Phil Murphy.
Continue the conversation on Twitter @Steve Adubato and on Facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD. And visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org.
Welcome back to New Jersey's next governor. I'm Steve Adubato. We're now joined by the Democratic candidate for governor, Ambassador Phil Murphy. Welcome, Ambassador.
Nice to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Right now, before we go to a whole range of questions for the Ambassador, we have a brief report from our partners at NJTV News on Ambassador Murphy's campaign platform.
Phil Murphy has been running hard for governor for nearly 3 years. He defeated 3 substantial Democrats in the primary. His career was mostly spent at Goldman Sachs, which made him wealthy. He poured $20 million of his money into the primary, but is taking public financing for the general election. He spent 4 years as U.S. Ambassador to Germany under President Obama. He has also served as National Democratic Finance Chair and a board member of the NAACP. Murphy is a progressive. He would hike the minimum wage, legalize marijuana, promote affordable housing, and create a public bank that would bring home state funds held elsewhere for investment here. His opponent, Kim Guadagno, warns that he'll raise taxes. He proposes $1.3 billion in new taxes, $600 million from hiking the tax on income over $1 million, $400 million from closing corporate loopholes, and $300 million from taxing marijuana sales. He has talked about a new tax to support transportation, but without specifics. Murphy chose Assemblywoman Sheila Oliver to be his lieutenant governor running mate. His strategy is to campaign vigorously and run out the clock. Most polls have him in the lead by double digits. His Achilles heel is the 23 years he spent at Goldman Sachs and the possibility that voters are resentful of Wall Street millionaires.
As always, we want to thank our partner and good friend, Michael Aaron, the Dean of the State House Press Corps, and our partners at NJTV News. Ambassador, we are being seen nationally on C-SPAN. We're also being seen on public television stations, WNET, WHYY, NJTV, of course, where we are right now, on radio, on AM 970 The Answer, WBGO, on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and FiOS as well. Ambassador, let's get right to the issue of taxes. This $1.3 billion in new taxes. Break that down for us, but particularly the part that helps property tax payers, homeowners.
So we have to understand what the state of the state is. And this is among the weakest economies in the United States. We've been downgraded 11 straight times. We lead the nation in home foreclosures. Household income has not only lagged other states, it's actually down during the Christie Guadagno years. That's the frame. We need a stronger and fairer economy that works not just for some, but for all. Part of that is making sure the folks who can afford it step up and have a tax fairness, so that's the wealthiest among us. We have some blatant corporate open loopholes that we can close. We can legalize, we think responsibly, marijuana and generate a significant amount of money. But far more importantly, we need to reprioritize what we're already spending.
For example?
So for instance, we've put out over $8 billion in corporate tax breaks for large corporations, and at the same time, we've underfunded public education by $9 billion. We've canceled big infrastructure projects and underfunded others. We've reduced NJ Transit state stipend by 90%. So it's not just a question of where can we get more revenues, it's a question of how do we reprioritize what we're spending. And by the way, in addition to that, let's grow this economy again. We've left billions of dollars of economic activity on the table over the past 7.5 years. There's no reason we can't reboot some of those economies that we used to dominate.
Ambassador, let me try this. We as you know and your team knows, we've been asking questions for the last month getting ready for this interview. So these questions came from AM 970, from NJTV, the Facebook page, from WNET, from FiOS as well. But the marijuana question.
Yes.
Why are you so confident that we can legalize it, control it, manage it, and not promote any new problems as it relates to drug use?
So let me tell you, Steve, the first lens and the most important one I look at this through is the social justice lens. We have the widest white, non-white gap of persons incarcerated in America and New Jersey. It's hard to believe it's New Jersey, but it is. There are many reasons, but the biggest one is low-end drug crimes. And so that's the first lens. I mean, I'm happy that if we legalize it and we do it right, we'll generate revenues, but that's not enough.
That's not the primary reason?
That's absolutely not the primary reason. It's a social justice reason. We have an enormous inequity in this state. It's unacceptable. It has to be fixed. It's part of, not the only step, part of comprehensive criminal justice reform. Now, the second point I'd make is that I'm glad we're not the first state that's doing it. Other states that have gone before us have done some things right and they've done some things wrong.
What have we learned?
So we've learned distribution issues. We've learned its impact on medical marijuana, which this administration has gummed up with folks who desperately need access for medical conditions. And so you've got Colorado, you've now got Nevada, Washington, Oregon. We're studying those examples to make sure that we do it right. That's absolutely, just doing it is not enough. Doing it right is important.
The other thing, go back to the tax issue. What's fascinating to us, and again, an Insider NJ, check out that website. There are online partners for political issues. The issue came from there, from FiOS, from Facebook, and my Twitter.
Yep.
By the way, put up the Twitter handle, if you will. People have been great with questions, and they'll also comment on this show as well. But this question really is interesting. It has to do with your tax policy again. Some on those sites and others have asked, okay, so if you raise taxes on the wealthiest New Jerseyans, by the way, do you define that?
Millionaires.
And up.
And up.
Are you afraid of losing some of those folks who say, I don't want to be there because I'm getting overtaxed? Then we lose all of their tax revenue.
So listen, you want a state that's welcoming to all folks. We're the most diverse state in the nation.
We are.
Folks, over the past 7.5+ years, with all due respect to this property tax cap of 2%, property taxes are up 17%. NJ transit fares are up 36%. Employee-based health care premiums up over 40%. It costs 20% more to send your kid to college in the state. So folks rightfully are saying, wait a minute, where's all this money going? And so I'd say back to property taxes, pull out your property tax bill and look at what portion of that is public education. That's been underfunded, as I mentioned a minute ago.
We'll talk about that. Would you fully fund the, and I don't want to get into the weeds here, you can go on the ambassador's website and he'll tell you more about his plan, but would you fully fund public schools based on what the state formula says is supposed to be there?
We would.
And by the way, how would we afford that?
We would. So let's just step back and say, what does that mean?
Sure.
There's one school funding formula in the history of our state that's been blessed by the Supreme Court. I believe they blessed it in 2008. And it was viewed as a national model because it went away from, as you know, money chasing blocks or districts rather, and money following.
Sorry for interrupting. So-called Abbott districts.
Yes,
urban districts.
And instead following kids and asking the questions you need to ask, recognizing that not every kid is born with the same set of circumstances or luck. What's your household look like? What language do you speak first at home? Are you on free or reduced lunch as a measure of poverty? Do you have special education needs, et cetera? So it built that from the bottom up. That to me is a very attractive, smart way to approach funding public education.
Would those dollars come from your tax plan?
That's a big part of where the proceeds would go from not just the revenues we're talking about, but again, reprioritizing. That's the bigger piece here. You talked about, and you mentioned the $1.3 billion. It's a $35 billion budget. So it's not just where revenues are coming from as listed. It's what are you doing to reprioritize in favor of kids, in this case, the $35 billion.
Excuse me for interrupting, Ambassador. Is there an area where you say, you know what, we don't really need to be spending the way we're spending, and so reprioritizing in general is one thing, but specifically, devil's in the details, you say.
I mean, I'll give you a few that come to mind, Steve. One is the corporate tax breaks. We're sending them out now at the rate of many hundreds of millions of dollars
to get businesses to come and stay. What about those who say we wouldn't get them otherwise if we didn't do that?
I think we need to be smarter about that. Should tax incentives be part of the package? Yes, I believe that. But we've used them, the Kim Guadagno administration has used them as one blunt instrument, one size fits all, only focused on big corporations, by the way, not on the small businesses. Let's be smarter about that. We're throwing hundreds of millions of dollars out there and we're not enforcing it. There are deals that companies commit to employ folks to generate ratables in terms of taxes. We need to be better about that. That's one. We've got out-of-network healthcare loopholes that are costing individuals and the state a ton of money. We've got hedge funds managing our pension assets and charging us huge fees and returning very little.
Are we getting a shaft?
I think we are. I think we are. Yeah.
How would you change those deals?
I'd get out of having hedge funds manage the pension assets. Listen, I think 30, 40 years ago when that asset class was first born, they charged an arm and a leg, but they returned a lot. So you got what you paid for. Big profits.
Now?
Today, they're still charging an arm and a leg, but the profits have gone away. And it's not just a passing phase. This has become a pretty clear, I don't know, permanent trend, but a long-term trend. There are a lot smarter ways to manage our pension assets that are cheaper, that are at the same risk. CalPERS is doing it, the biggest pension fund in America. State of Nevada, city of New York, there's no reason we shouldn't be doing it.
You know, Ambassador, I asked the Lieutenant Governor this question. I'm going to ask you as well.
Please.
Your family. Who is your family and who is Phil Murphy? I hate to call it the Reader, man, is that old school? I'm going to date myself. The Reader's Digest version? A little bit about you.
Reader's Digest, you and I will both do that one together.
It's okay. It still had value. Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm married to Tammy Murphy for 23 years. She is my partner in everything. She's out there as hard as I am every single day. And we've been blessed with 4 children. Josh is 20, a sophomore in college. Emma is 18 and taking a gap year before college and working on the campaign as Josh did last year. And Charlie's a junior in high school and Sam's a freshman in high school. We also have 3 dogs and a bird for you keeping track at home on the scorecard.
It's a busy household.
It's busy and noisy.
And speaking of young children, we're involved in an initiative that really deals with infants and babies and the kinds of things that state policy can do. It's called Right from the Start NJ. It's a public awareness campaign that we're doing at the Caucus Educational Corporation. Here's the question. What, if anything, can the state do as it relates to those babies and infants, particularly as it relates to child care, if you will?
Yep. So we have stood for a couple of things. One is we have stood for a child and dependent care tax credit, which would allow folks to get a much bigger tax credit to allow them to go out and work and feel like they can get someone to take care of their kids. Right now, we have too many folks faced with that horrible dilemma.
Right.
I'm desperate to work to put food on the table for my family, but I can't afford to leave my kids alone. There are smart ways to get at that. We stand strongly for that. By the way, you asked about kids, but the same thing could be said about parents and grandparents. My mother-in-law passed away not that long ago. My father-in-law was her caregiver. So I'd like to not only have a child and dependent care tax credit, but also a caregiver tax credit for parents and grandparents. Another thing we stand for is we want to get to universal pre-K as fast as we can.
Can we afford
to get kids? Yeah, we can. I think we have to phase it in over several years. I don't think you could do that on a moment's notice. You know, I asked rhetorically, who said it was a right to have public education between the ages of 5 and 18, but not before 5 and not after 18? So we want to extend both ends. We stand for free community college, which is cheaper than universal pre-K, but something we think we can get to relatively quickly, and universal pre-K, not just for some, but for all.
Yeah, by the way, we're taping on the, actually the 17th, no, excuse me, the 19th of September. I woke up this morning and saw, happened to be in a whole variety of papers, that the ambassador was calling for free education at our community colleges.
Correct.
And by the way, there are some great community colleges in this state. Why did you do that? And what do you say to those who say, great idea, but who's going to pay for it?
Well, it turns out this one is in the scheme of things. First of all, this is an investment. So again, we've had an administration that would lead you to believe money gets thrown out the window. You know, where did my money go? Where did my property taxes go? Where did my income taxes go? When you're seeing underfunded public education, underfunded infrastructure, those are rightful questions. This is an investment, and it happens to be a fairly modest one. So because the federal government plays such a big role in community colleges, this is probably a couple $100 million that we think we can phase in over a couple of years. Why there? Because if we are successful in reigniting the growth that has been lost under this administration in the innovation and infrastructure economies, it won't just be PhDs and four-year college grads. That linchpin, that community college population is going to be incredibly important to fill those jobs. So we think it's a very good return on investment.
Ambassador, these questions around pension-related issues
Yes.
come in from Facebook, Twitter, WNET's website, NJTV's website, FiOS, et cetera, as well as others who wanted to ask you this. The public employee pension situation is terrible at best. It's potentially a crisis.
Yep.
You had history a while back when you were, was it a pension commission
Yes,
under the Governor Cody administration?
Yes, I chaired the original commission on this under Governor Cody.
Should the state fully fund public employee pensions A and B? If that were to happen, again, where would those dollars come from?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, period. Why? Well, it's a matter of trust. We're a state that used to be respected and trusted. And if you're a public sector employee that's been left at the altar now for year after year and had things jammed down your throat,
right.
Or you're a rating agency that's downgraded us 11 straight times, or, by the way, a young kid, we lead the nation in exporting high school seniors.
We lose them.
We lose them. Now, at one level, that's a badge of honor. The world wants our kids. But at another level, you say, come on, can't you keep more of our kids home? And we've got some thoughts and ideas around that. We must regain our trust. The trust in this state.
But what would that have to do with the pension situation?
Because I think you want to be known as a state where a deal's a deal. We say, you know what, we're going to own up.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Ambassador.
Yeah.
Help people understand what the deal, as you interpret it, really was and is, and how it's not being kept.
So fully funding the pension obligation. We wrote our report, as you mentioned. I chaired this commission 12 years ago. First recommendation of many, no more pension holidays, even 12 years ago.
Explain it to people, like, we're not paying this year.
We're not paying.
The state's not gonna pay.
The state's been kicking this can down the road for going on 20 years, since the 1990s, and the cumulative impact is now almost overwhelming. So at some point, you got to say, stop, enough. we're good for our word. We will pay and stand up for our obligations. I don't think you get there next Monday, but you have to show transparently and deliberately you're going to get there sooner than later and own up to our end of the bargain.
By the way, in this 1 hour special, New Jersey's next governor being seen nationally on C-SPAN, on WNET, WHYY, NJTV, FiOS, if you will, and also on NPR affiliate WBGO, AM 970. Lots of different places, but one of the things that kept coming up, and the Lieutenant Governor talked about this, he says, you know, we want to fully fund the pension as well. But she argues that we should sit back down with public employees and renegotiate, particularly when it comes to pension, but also health care benefits. She said, no, it's a Cadillac plan. Can't afford it, you say.
Listen, it's hard. Just think about this for a minute. If you and I struck a deal, and it was over a course of 20 years, and I welched on my end of the deal. And 20 years later, my first move was to say, hey, Steve, could you sit down and make some more concessions? And then if you do, I'll get around to standing up to my end of the deal.
What about if you were running out of money?
We could find the money. Absolutely could find the money. We got to grow this economy.
Hey, sorry for interrupting. If you said to me, you know what, Steve, I know that's what we said, but the money's not there, you say?
I would say that the stewardship of this economy over the past 7.5 years has been underwhelming by any measure. We've left tens of billions of dollars of economic activity on the table, probably $2 to $3 billion of state revenue that could have been put to funding our pensions. We need real strong stewardship of this economy that finds that money, that not only talks about where we can get tax equity, but reprioritize what we're already spending and grow the pie. We need a stronger and fairer economy that works not just for some, but for every New Jersey family. And I think we can, with the right leadership, we can get that.
If you're listening to us on the radio or not seeing the video, we're talking to Ambassador Phil Murphy, who is in fact the Democratic candidate for governor. The election is on November the
7th, Tuesday.
Right,
please get out and vote.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's nationalize it. Talking about elections. You were here, Ambassador, sitting right where you are in this beautiful NJTV studio, the Agnes Varus NJTV studio in Newark. And I asked you about Donald Trump then.
Yeah.
That was in the primary. I said, what grade? It was not a good grade.
Yeah.
You actually went further than that to talk about how dangerous you believe he is.
Yeah.
You've had some time to see this presidency. Today, you say?
Underwhelming. I mean, I don't see leadership that we need. I see lack of clarity on moral authority. I see a sort of herky-jerky, one day to the next, different impulses.
Did Charlottesville bother you?
Charlottesville bothered me a lot.
How so?
Well, at many levels. I'm as a human being, as a dad, as an American, former national board member of the NAACP, former U.S. ambassador to Germany, where National Socialism took root and led to the awful Holocaust and consequences. I think on moral authority, it's pass-fail. You can't get a C, gentleman's C for that. You can't wiggle one position to the next. I hope we can find common ground. The president has spoken a good game, for instance, on infrastructure investment. We desperately need the federal government.
Especially in New Jersey.
Amen. To put that down payment and certainty on building the Gateway Tunnel.
The Gateway Tunnel has to be done.
Has to be done.
Because to let folks know, they hear Gateway, what does that mean?
Yeah, so
they let people know why it's so important.
Let me go back and say that there's not been a new tunnel under the Hudson in over 100 years. There was a tunnel project that was built up for years. The funding was found. The Governor Christie, the Lieutenant Governor Guadagno canceled that. The ARC Tunnel. I think a huge historic
They
blunder.
thought it would go to the wrong place, underground at Macy's. They said, not a good idea. New Jersey gets the shaft.
There was wide view that it wasn't perfect, but it was a heck of a lot closer to perfect than it was to something that should have been canceled. And we've paid enormous consequences for the cancellation of that. So now we've got next up the Gateway project, which is a different version of the ARC Tunnel. Folks say in many respects it's better, fine. But the ARC project, the tunnel, first stage of which would have been opening early next year. So we're now 8 to 10 years away, and we need the federal government desperately to put that anchor order into this. The Obama administration had committed half of it, which I think is about $12 billion. We need the Trump administration to do the same. And then the rest of it will be funded by New York, New Jersey, the Port Authority.
Lots of folks on NJ.com. Again, those folks, I want to thank all of you for contributing so many insightful, thoughtful questions. But many folks on NJ.com, as well as on insider, and Jay wanted to know, how would you, if you were governor, significantly, dramatically improve NJ Transit?
Oh, Lord. Start by funding it fully and putting the right people in the leadership positions. Listen, I ask this question rhetorically a lot. If you are the fourth smallest state geographically in the nation, which we are.
That's right.
If you're the densest state in the nation, which we are, and if you sit next to the largest market in the world, which we do, you would think if you screwed everything else up, the one thing you'd get right would be commuter rail. And we've proven otherwise in this administration. So fully fund it, put serious, competent leadership in place, make it stop crossing wires between the operating budget and the capital budget, including very important safety programs. Let's make the consumer experience a satisfying one. They're paying 36% more to ride NJ Transit during the Kim Guadagno administration than they were at the beginning of it, and you can't conclude in any way that their customer experience is 36% better. So it's all of those steps, and we believe we can take them, and we must take them.
Let's go back nationally, but also has impact here in New Jersey.
Please.
On AM 970, on Twitter, on Facebook, other places as well. The question kept getting asked about the DACA decision. There are 22,000, by conservative estimate, 22,000 dreamers in New Jersey. It's confusing as we do this program in late September as to where things are in Washington. Yeah. What's at stake, and what do you believe should happen in Washington to resolve the dreamer DACA issue, but also the large immigration question?
Yeah. Listen, these kids are every bit as American as my 4 kids. So I find it outrageous, unacceptable, un-American that they're being shown the door. So
the president says he doesn't want to show them the door.
Depends on the day of the week. He did and then he didn't. I mean, this is a guy who's all over the place. I hope cooler heads, I hope American heads, American values prevail. These are our most precious, in many cases, brightest assets, incredibly important to our future. As you said, Steve, 22,000 in the state. Someone told me they pay 60-odd million in taxes. They generate $1.6 billion in economic activity. Over 90% of them are educated or going to school or working. It's an extraordinary group of folks who have had their whole life story has been extraordinary.
Country. By the way, the rule of law thing, when you hear people say that, oh, it's the rule of law. We have to have the rule of law dictate here. And the president, President Obama at the time, executive order, it's got to run out. He let them stay here, but that's not really the law,
no.
You say?
Listen, he hides behind an attorney general, Jeff Sessions, who's one of the most anti-dreamer elected officials, or appointed now, in the entire United States.
Should Sessions go?
I don't know about Sessions should go or not, but he shouldn't. These guys shouldn't be taken out on dreamers. Where's the compassion? You know, my guiding light is the poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty by Emma Lazarus. Let's open our doors wide. We are the beacon. People should want to still look up to our country and our values and say, you know what, that's a place we want to be. We want to bring our kids up in America and in New Jersey, I hope.
Sanctuary cities.
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor has a clear point of view on that. She talked about yours. I want you to talk about your view on sanctuary cities.
Listen, I wish we weren't ever even having to talk about it. I thought Hillary Clinton was going to get elected president of the United States, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion. And we are. We'll do what it takes. I think we're going to look back at this time in history and say that governors will have never mattered more, both in the day-to-day governing, because there's not a lot getting done in Washington. It's going to have to get done at the state level. But secondly, we're going to need governors who stand up with a steel backbone and push back on health care bills that would ruin our state, tax plans that would ruin our state, and stand up on behalf of dreamers and immigrants. So if we need to be a sanctuary state, that's what we'll be. We need governors who have a steel backbone and say, Mr. President or Attorney General Sessions, you will not do that in the great state of New Jersey.
Ambassador, if you were elected governor, the biggest difference you would make if, compared to another person elected to be our governor, would be biggest difference?
I think I would go back to the fact, Steve, that I grew up working poor. My dad didn't get out of high school. My mom did. We all worked. I worked under the table when I was 13. I slept in my parents' bedroom until I was 9. We worked hard. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but we were happy. And that informs me today. Why is that? And why was that the case then in an imperfect America and not the case for that little kid in a working poor family today, or worse yet, in poverty, or frankly, too often in the middle class? And the reason is the deal used to be, if you went to school, you got good grades, you stayed out of trouble, you're doing better than mom and dad. That's no longer the case for too many of our kids today. So the biggest difference I would make, this isn't abstract. I don't have to read about this in a book. I want to lift those kids up. I want to govern this state for them and for their kids.
Ambassador, I want to thank you for joining us. I also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for joining us. Issue-oriented, policy-oriented, impacting the people of the state. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Stay right
My
there.
pleasure.
Also want to thank our partners at Public Broadcasting, NJTV, our partners right here, WNET, WHYY, our folks at FiOS 1 News, AM 970 The Answer, WBGO, C-SPAN across the country. Thank you for joining us on Facebook as well. And just remember this. The election is, in fact, on Tuesday, November the 7th. Make sure that you get out to vote because democracy is not a spectator sport. I'm Steve Adubato. Thanks for watching.
New Jersey's Next Governor with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Special thanks to our media partners, WNET, NJTV, WHYY, Verizon Fios 1 News, AM 970 The Answer, and WBGO and WBGO.org. Funding for New Jersey's Next Governor with Steve Adubato has been provided by RWJ Barnabas Health, New Jersey Resources, the New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJM Insurance Group, the law firm of Gibbons PC, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey residents about important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey. Media and promotional support has been provided by NJ.com and by Insider NJ.
You may not have heard of TAVR. Raj and Sandhya have. It's the minimally invasive alternative to open heart valve replacement. RWJ Barnabas Health is New Jersey's leading TAVR provider, and we continue to perfect it. Patients are often back to their lives in just a few days. Innovative valve replacement surgery, because you can't be replaced. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.